there is a need for us to rethink what we are doing. Against the region, sorry, did I say 80 US dollars? It's 42 US dollars. Against the region, Barbados cannot feel comfortable on average with a revenue from an industry which has been as long in existence as cruise, which has attracted as much effort this country has put into it as circumstance where we are earning $42 on average, less than the regional average. And we most certainly cannot feel comfortable if we are comparing ourselves to the very best in the region and are earning approximately 100 United States dollars less than they do. Last year we had a record year, so we were told, and 800,000 passengers passed through the Bridgetown port. But if each of those 800,000 States dollars more, the way that they spent the 100 United States dollars in St. Thomas, for example, or in St. Martin, for example, then Barbados would have benefited from 80 million United States dollars in revenue. And if my understanding of St. Thomas is correct, that in fact you may be about just slightly over 2, that we could be earning approximately 110 million United States dollars if we were on par and on pace with the major competitors in this region. So therefore, we are confronted with a painful situation of stagnation of the cruise sector. And that stagnation is perhaps best evidenced by the fact that the information which I now have as a result of the situational analysis indicates that between 2005 and 2015, cruise arrivals increased from 405,300 to 554,400, which was an increase of 33%. For the same period, however, when one does not just simply look at arrivals, but also looks at recognize that the average expenditure per passenger declined by 30% from United States $111.82 to US $78.03. And the average expenditure for crew dropped by 47% from 76 US to $40 US. Now, the significance of the decline in passenger spend is obvious, because the passengers are going to get off of the ship and they're going to have an onshore experience, or hopefully have an onshore experience, which takes them across Barbados and experiencing attractions, etc. Not so much so the crew, because they're coming here on itineraries which bring them with expenditure is very often for crew expenditure to have dropped by 47% also sends a warning signal to us, but it knows that the average passenger gets his or her information about a destination by having a word with a friendly ear held by a member of the crew. And if the crew itself is not enthusiastic about getting off the shore in Barbados, that lack of enthusiasm, getting off the boat on shore in Barbados, that lack of enthusiasm will be shared among the population on board the boat, and quite frankly, that is the reflection of the figures that we are now seeing before us. Beyond that, an entity called the Business Research Economic Analysis Forum has been doing some work on cruise sector performance in this region, and the situational analysis reflects a level of guest satisfaction which we would simultaneously with the drop in visitor expenditure has come a decline. They are P&O cruises, seaborne cruises, Holland America cruises, and of course Carnival itself. The Carnival fascination, as you know, comes year-round and usually comes here on a Wednesday. The boat will carry, or the ship will carry, approximately 2,600 passengers. Every 4 months, Carnival Cruise Corporation, which owns all of those entities that I just mentioned, P&O, Seabourn, Holland, the ships are no longer the fantasy class of 2,600 passengers capacity, but they're now a Vista class ship which will carry approximately 4,000 to 4,500 passengers. Royal Caribbean has gone even further and is rolling out new ships in what they call the Oasis class, which is a 6,000 passenger ship. So that the capacity of the ship, the amount of people that the ship will carry, is substantially larger to that which we have been accustomed to dealing with in Barbados. We have sold ourselves to the world as being a home porting destination. But as a home porting destination, it means that we must have the capacity in the Bridgetown port and also at the Grantley Adams International Airport to carry the throughput of the number of passengers that we are expecting to arrive within on any given day if you're going to be doing a home porting experience. Now, let me just help to walk you through this. In winter, it is possible to have home porting being done by 2 or 3 ships in the Bridgetown port on any given day. And you will have people arriving on a Saturday, for example, and leaving the Grantley Adams Airport to go on board a vessel. On its best day of performance, as I have discovered, according to the information reaching me, the Bridgetown port has been able to manage 10,000 throughput of passengers. Now, I want you to pause and reflect on the size of the ships that we are now talking about, because there are some days when we have 5 ships in the Bridgetown port at one time. If we have, by 2020, the vast majority of the ships in these waters, and remember, the Caribbean is attracting 53% of the world's cruise traffic. So clearly they're going to come where the bulk of the demand is. So if we want to maintain our share of the market, we have to have the capacity for the ships that will be in the marketplace. And those ships will be the ones which are carrying 6,000 people if you're talking Royal Caribbean, and have the capacity to carry 4,000 people if you're talking the Carnival Cruise Lines Corporation group of companies, as opposed to the 2,600 per passengers that we are now talking about. On its best day, the port is telling me that they handle 10,000 people. 5 ships in the Bridgetown port, and you handle a throughput of 10,000 people. 5 ships in the Bridgetown port in 2020 or in 2021, average of 4,000 or 5,000 people or more, you would have to have the ability of a throughput of 25,000 people, which means that you have to look at increasing the capacity of the port by more than double what it now can do. And that is what we have to do if we are going to hold on to our share of home porting in the Caribbean, and if we are going to be able to be relevant as a destination on the itinerary of cruise lines, which are bringing bigger ships into the Caribbean and stopping at places which have made substantial investment in the port infrastructure so that they can accommodate the size of the ship and the quantity of the passengers that they are marketing to us. The reality is that right now, therefore, substantial work has to be done in order to be able to make the Bridgetown port competitive as you look into the next 2 or 3 years of activity that is coming before us. The issue of infrastructure does not only end at the Bridgetown port, because if you're going to talk about selling home porting experiences to the world, we therefore also have to have an airport with capacity to do the air-to-sea transfers. And again, at its best day, the Grantley Adams Airport arrivals hall at peak can handle 1,500 people, and departure another 1,500 people. So again, I need not belabor the point. Substantial work has to be done with regard to the upgrading of the capacity in that regard. Beyond that, there is another tale that has to be told, and about which, I take no pleasure, but the country must be aware of where we stand. And that is that in 2016, an audit of the cruise industry was done, and it was done as a result of a growing history of concerns being articulated at the level of the Florida Caribbean Cruise Association and at the level of stakeholders in Barbados and across the region, who feel that the visitor experience is impaired and investment made in our cruise sector is not bearing the level of fruit that it should bear as a result of the experiences that visitors are having in Barbados. That cruise audit speaks to, and I have a copy of it here with me, it speaks to some fundamentals, again, about which we have complete control as a country. The quality of the restrooms available in Bridgetown, where they are in fact available, the quality of the restrooms available across the country, where we invite people to go on an island tour, but in many instances, they would choose not to use the facilities that we offer in order to relieve themselves or heed a call of nature. The quality of the cleanliness of the country, complaints about refuse, litter, uncollected and unmoved garbage, the issues of accessibility for persons with disabilities, the lack of appropriate signage, all of these are things in this 100-page document called the Barbados Tourism Product Cruise Audit Report 2016. All of them have cried out for urgent attention, and it is a matter of deep regret that I come to the chair, and within 10 weeks I have to tell you that the vast majority of them remain concerns of the same nature and kind that were recorded in 2016, and that should have rung alarm bells since then. So if we are going to say to ourselves that we're going to thump ourselves on the chest and bask in the glory of 800,000 people having passed through the Bridgetown port, without recognizing that we have invited 800,000 people to come and see and experience an impaired product, and that the consequence of having a record number of people come in to experience an impaired product that we know needs to be corrected is that we have 800,000 more voices going out there to say Barbados is not what it should be. And that is the worst form of marketing and advertising that we can possibly do. And that is the message that I want to bring across to this country. That when we start to become serious about this business, we have to be prepared also now to look at the granular details about passenger spend. And the tale that is being told is that 10 years ago, Barbados was earning $57 million per year from cruise. 10 years ago. Today, Barbados is earning $57.3 million per year from cruise. So we have grown over 10 years by $300,000. When you factor in inflation, we really have not grown. We have not actually stagnated. We have actually started to go backwards. And against our competitors in the region, as I said to you before, we are $42 US below average in terms of passenger spend and $100 US below the top flight destinations in the Caribbean. Last year, and in 2015, quite frankly, when the research, much of this research would have been done, this country was being told by its Minister of Finance, as he then was, and by its Minister of Tourism, as he then was, that the question is, what should we cut? And that was never the question. The truth of the matter is that the question that should have been before the country then and has to be before the country now is, how do we grow? And we have clearly the capacity, because we have been doing cruise for so long and have had the competitive advantage in the region, which itself holds the competitive advantage in the world, that we should not be in a situation where we lag so far behind in terms of performance as compared to our neighbors. And if we ask the question, how can we grow? The answer has to be by setting up the marker to recognize that it is possible, as indeed it has been possible for other countries in the Caribbean, to get $100 US per person from every passenger that is passing through the Bridgetown port. And if you're talking about 800,000 passengers, you're talking about $80 million. And if you're going to talk about being slightly over $100 US, the truth is you could stand to earn an extra 100 million United States dollars, which we are now allowing to go a-begging. And the fact, again, ladies and gentlemen, is that Barbados simply can't afford it. And the decision that has to be taken by this country is, are we going to continue to rest on our laurels, or are we going to continue to be happy for it to be taken out of our hides financially by way of levels of taxation that are draconian in nature and unbearable? Sit up and take notice of what we can do. Led the region in, when we know that the region has led the world, and get on with trying to make this place the best that it can be in terms of returning us to a position of primacy and getting levels of expenditure that we desperately need to get. Cabinet on has proceeded to put in place with immediate effect a national commission on cruise development for Barbados. That commission will be charged with the terms of reference of going into the wider community and consulting widely with all stakeholders. Some will be public hearings so that we can involve every man and woman on the street, every vendor, every taxi operator, every person operating a small business, people who have ideas about attractions, because quite frankly, the quality of attraction in Barbados is also a problem. We were once the marquee destination in the region, and we have fallen far from that which we used to be. I think I read for you the point where we had in 2015 an average passenger spend of $111.82, and we have dropped by 30%. In 2005 we had a passenger spend of $111.82, and we have dropped now to $78.03. So that the reality is that we have to look seriously at new attractions and involving people in culture, involving people in entertainment, involving people in sports, to create things which are refreshing, exciting, and interesting for people visiting Barbados to do. And irrespective of what the Commission for Cruise Development recommends, we know that there are some things that we can do better. You don't have to wait on a lot of people to sit down and have hearings to tell us some of these things. But beyond that, the Commission is going to be asked to report back to Cabinet within 12 weeks, so as to put us in a position to start for the winter season to implement some initiatives which we hope can turn around or begin to turn around the visitor experience in this country. And again, as far as I'm concerned, I can predict some of the things that will be told, and I know some of the things that we have to do. We got to get signage right. We got to get garbage collection and litter under control. We have to make the country cleaner. We got to fix basic things like bathroom plumbing. The cruise audit, ladies and gentlemen, went so far as to outline an experience in the Fairchild Street bus stand, where the ladies' bathroom, so that visitors using, and this, quite frankly, this is not just about visitors either, because this is also a tale about how we treat ourselves. And that is perhaps the saddest part of it all. It's not just about visitors to the island. It is about what we inflict on the school children using the Fairchild Street bus stand, on the ladies who have to catch a bus, that you go into a bathroom in the ladies' bathroom facility, and there's a hole in the roof, and you sit on the throne and you look up and see somebody looking down at you. And we cannot be serious. And those are the things that, again, you can't blame the outside world. You have at some point to start to say, Barbados, this is about you, this is about me, this is about all of us together. And how can we move this country forward in order to save ourselves from certain and impending disaster? Because if we don't treat ourselves well and we're comfortable with that, the reality is that the rest of the world may not be as comfortable with that kind of arrangement and would choose to be elsewhere rather than come here and be treated badly. And I can't put it any more directly than that. The initial recommendations, therefore, we will seek to implement in a timely manner for some visible changes to take place before the winter season. And thereafter, there are going to have to be more long-term improvements to the cruise sector in order to prepare us to remain a viable destination, and in my view, to reach the level of being a marquee destination by 2021. I do not think it is beyond this country to compete against St. Thomas. I do not think it is beyond this country to compete against St. Martin. I do not think it is beyond Barbados to compete against St. Kitts. With the greatest possible respect to colleagues in CARICOM, I do not think it is beyond Barbados to compete against St. Lucia. But the fact of the matter is that we are spinning top in mud and taking far too much for granted, while the rest of the world is lining itself up to eat a large piece of our lunch at a time when we can least afford it. And that, ladies and gentlemen, brings me to the closing point, which is to name for you the Commission on Cruise Development. It will be chaired by former Ambassador Mr. Errol Humphrey. The Deputy Chair will be the head of the Small Business Association and a former entertainer himself, Mr. Dean Straker. It will include Senator Lisa Cummins, who is now chairman of the Bridgetown Port, Mr. Vic Fernandes, who is now chairman of the Grantley Adams International Airport, Mr. Kevin Yearwood, who has a lifetime of experience in attraction operation and tour operations, Mr. Jeffrey Roach, who is CEO of the Bridgetown Cruise Terminals, Ms. Roseanne Myers, who herself is an attraction operator, Mr. Alfredo Weatherhead, who is also involved in attractions, tours, and hotels, Ms. Natalie Burke, Entertainment and Culture, Ms. Kerrie Gooding, who is an entertainment journalist, Mr. Adrian Bailey, who is a taxi port operator, Mr. Patrick Eswick, who himself has a background in culture and small business, Mr. Andre Miller, who has a background in marine biology and water sports, Mrs. Amanda Reefer, who has a background in sports, culture, and entertainment, and Ms. Carol Roberts, who has an extensive background in culture and media. We are hoping that the Commission can get into full stride by the first week in September, and we are anticipating the fullest possible input from the widest possible cross-section of the people of Barbados in order for us to be able to benefit from a large cross-section of opinion and ideas as to how we as Barbadians and stakeholders, directly and indirectly, in the cruise future of this island, and quite frankly, the long-term tourism development of the island, can all play our part. Are there any questions?
Yeah. Good morning, Minister. For both CETA and BeijingReporter.com, Ian Bourne. With regards to the both cruise and airport and seaport, in other words, and you're speaking of expansion, are you looking to regain Category 1 for Grantley Adams International? And if so, what timeline? And in terms of expansion, you're looking at 2020, 2021. Will you therefore, while you're waiting for the port to be expanded, incorporate a partnership with either Port Ferdinand and or Port St. Charles to accommodate the Vista and Oasis classes that you spoke of earlier?
Let me deal first with the Category 1 matter. It is an interesting phenomenon and a coincidence, I assure you, as I understand it. Efforts are being made by he who would previously have led this ministry to resuscitate his political career by running as president of the Democratic Labour Party. If a detailed assessment of performance meant anything in terms of ascension to the leadership of a major political party in Barbados is concerned, it would be well advised that Mr. Sealy don't bother. Category 1 status is far, far away for Barbados, and for a number of reasons, some of which I will decline to go into because of issues of national security. Suffice it to say that we have, if we're going to be interested in Category 1 status, not to be dodging the ICAO, which is the International Civil Aviation Organization, who do frequent audits of airports. We can't be putting them off and telling them, come back next year. We have to be doing the audits and passing them. We have to be refreshing our legislative framework. We have to be in a position where our regulations are contemporary and up to date and at the cutting edge. I have just come back from an ICAO meeting in Canada, which I attended only for the specific purpose of asking the Secretary General of the ICAO to give Barbados a little time so that they can bring down a team here in October to hold our hand, so that they can help us to get where we need to get, so that comments which we would want to be avoided about the country would not be made about the country with respect to its ability to maintain the level of civil aviation that it now has. I think you can read between the lines, and I don't wish to go any further on that because it's not my interest in sending any signal that will harm this place. But suffice it to say, institutions are not just places where people arrive and depart. They're also places which have commercial value for our country. They're also places which indirectly help to develop commercial value for a country. I give you the example that I shared with folks already at the Grantley Adams Airport 80th anniversary opening celebrations, that we have an island in which people started to import drones, and not just import them, fly them. But we have no regulatory environment within which the drones are operated. And the drones are not just instruments of pleasure. They should also be seen as instruments of commercial potential. That I could be in a business where I move small parcels from St. John to St. James by air. But at what level am I allowed to fly them? I'm supposed to operate and govern that structure. And that is part of the assessment of an airport's function. Civil aviation. These are things that Barbados hasn't even begun to discuss. And so frankly, ladies and gentlemen, even if only for the reason that we do not have a national carrier that is flying into the United States directly, and so therefore to qualify as a Category 1, you have to have a national carrier flying into the United States. Even if only for that reason, let us take Category 1 off the table until such time as we are in a position to do far to get there. We have to be able to not just run, but to sprint in order to survive, to walk straight. With regard to the seaport, it is not my belief that the existing ports that you mentioned would be able to carry the Oasis class type vessel. I certainly must tell you, I have not canvassed the opinion, but it is not my belief that they are going to be able to carry it. Having said so, however, all options are on the table, and the establishment of the Cruise Development Commission is specifically designed for us to be able to have hearings with everybody who has a stake. I can tell you that insofar as the north of the island is concerned, I have met with Ms. Michelle Page, who is the head of the Florida Caribbean Cruise Association. I went to Miami and sat with her, the Prime Minister and I. We spent some time there, and she is very clear. There is a desire on the part of smaller ships in the region to be able to find a place to berth in the north of the island for cruise traffic purposes. Expressions of interest have been made both about Holetown and about Speightstown, because of the fact that you can come off the ship in the Holetown case and experience the historical legacy of where the colonists originally landed or are said to have landed, and frankly the commercial development of Holetown at Lime Grove, etc. In Speightstown's case, it is because of the very obvious architecture, which is still very colonial in nature and appeals to a certain catchment of the visiting community. In both instances, some infrastructural work would be required. But it is not a bad idea for us to look at the other two ports as well. And as I said, no decision has been taken on that at this stage. I don't want to preempt the work of the Commission, but all of these are matters which the Commission will be asked to investigate, inquire about, and make recommendations to us. I can also say, and should also say at this point, that what we have no interest in is in getting ourselves embroiled in things that we can do ourselves, but yet still choose to pay people to do for us. And in the past, been talk about paying people $34 million to manage the Bridgetown when we can pretty much manage the Bridgetown port for ourselves, and to bring a company into Barbados when Barbados does not really need, or certainly this cabinet does not see Barbados as needing that, is something that, again, is not immediately on the cards. All options are on the table with respect to a way forward, but this minister is not excited by Russian money.
Just as a quick follow-up, in relation to what you also said about customer service, do you see then that NICE has reached its shelf life?
No, I think that NICE has a lot of work. NICE has a lot of work that it could and should perhaps have done. And again, I don't wish to bring this discussion into an environment in which we are seeking. Frankly, no, I understand, but customer service began before NICE, and I've learned when we were at school, when we were little children. And again, just as with the bathroom facilities, this issue about customer service is about visitors, a manner of treating to ourselves. We come into a place and tell each other good morning. We speak to each other in the most brusque and abrupt way. We use language that, unless you were really vexed with them, but you use that language and those adjectives in a way that suggests that you are happy to see them. And you all know what I mean. And part of the difficulty here is that we have to really take a long look in the mirror and ask ourselves, is this the Barbados that we really want to live in? Is this what we are happy with? Because the truth is that some people who are strangers to our shores find it a little bit overwhelming, and some are turned off by it.
So just a quick question.
Yeah.
You spoke about obviously looking to up not just the arrivals but the expenditure of the visitors here. A large component and that concern has been Bridgetown and the lack of either activities or things for the visitors to do. Now, oftentimes you go into town, you speak to people who are there and they explain. So are there any plans then to look at the revitalization of Bridgetown and help Bridgetown up its game as well? Most certainly, and that has to be a core aspect of it. The cruise audit report that I just referred to speaks extensively to the experience in Bridgetown. And again, the fierce urgency of the word now is something that I am begging the country to try to come to terms with. There is an urgency about the hour that we now live in. I can't put it any different than that. We stand to lose all that we have gained. The quality of life of Barbadians, the things that we take for granted, are now on the table. We just can't sustain it anymore. And the thing that helps us to sustain it is the ability to earn revenue. But we're allowing 100 million United States dollars to go adrift when we could fight for it. And the consequence of fighting for it then means that you have a discussion which you should never have about what you're going to cut. And what did that mean? What you're going to cut? When you hear Minister of Finance tell you that, or former Minister of Finance, he's telling you, well, your services, whatever things you became accustomed to, whether it's healthcare, education, transport, your television station, what are you going to get rid of? And a country can't grow if you're just cutting. So the issue for us really has to be, yes, Bridgetown is the capital city. Bridgetown is not wheelchair accessible. The healthiest people in the world, frankly, are sitting with a degree of impairment,
not because of the fact that they can't walk, but they just can't walk well because they're a little old. That's really what it is. You know, a fella may have to have a wheelchair, or a lady may have to have a wheelchair assistance because of the fact that got a lot of money to cruise the world. I have millions of dollars in my bank account, but my hips aren't what they used to be. Working, the doctors can't work a miracle. They could get me comfortable, but they can't ask me to walk through a mile of Bridgetown experience, so I got to use a wheelchair. But if that passenger has to choose, as they now do, to stay on the ship, because getting off the ship and out of the port is a massive challenge. Experiencing Bridgetown is a massive challenge. And I have seen in my time of aircraft, I mean, we know the reality. We know that, and I've had this discussion with the Barbados Tourism Management Incorporated as recently as yesterday when they had their first board meeting. We have to come to a point, in my view, in Barbados, where every new hotel, every greenfield investment must, tourism sector, whether it is in hotels, restaurants, attractions, must be asked to make special provision for people who need a wheelchair facility for a bathroom. We go all around the world and we see it. Around the world, we see the first 2 or so seats on either side of the row of seats reserved for wheelchair accessibility. We know that all screens which have audio and so on are closed captioned for the hearing impaired. As at the ICAO meeting, which I was at, the person who was the assistant to the Secretary General handed me a business card that was in English and in French and in Braille. But in Barbados, these are unheard of. But that is where the quality of experience by the visitor is now going. And unless we're going to become irrelevant, that is where we have to be. So I pay a maximum respect to your question. Bridgetown is really the centerpiece of the investment that must be made in terms of transformation. Interactive experiences in Bridgetown is something that the audit report talks about. We are UNESCO World Heritage Site that developed that in a way that the visitor to Bridgetown experiences anything significant about it being a UNESCO designated World Heritage Site. The signage is not there. There's no easy availability of tour guides who can speak multiple languages to tell you why Barbados is a UN. And quite frankly, I suspect that even though we have the designation, there are not many Barbadians themselves who can tell us why we are a UN designated World Heritage Site. And all of those are things that we have to get right. Any others? No? All right. Well, thank you very much for participating. And I believe that once the commission starts to meet, I will have a few other things to say, but in association with them, as we go through this journey of trying to make sure that everybody is on board across the country and is able to play to the extent that they have an interest. And I certainly hope they do their maximum support to what we are attempting to achieve. Thank you.